Okay, good morning, everybody. Hope you all have joined in. I am guessing some more people will be joining in. So you could ask your queries on the chat box. I think we'll have the chat box on the monitor. Harshi, put up the chat box on the monitor. So I'll be reading through your queries or any responses that you have on the chat box, right? To start with, let's just begin with a couple of you. Just tell me if my voice is audible and you're able to hear me, and if the streaming is going good, you're able to see. Yeah, I am audible as well. Okay, then. Yeah. So that will be the place that you will be communicating with me. Okay. You can ask your queries there. So the first thing is like an array of all the ganashed cakes. The whipped cream is not done yet. I'll tell you why. Because we are doing the stacking for tomorrow. You all have the schedule that's been sent on the WhatsApp support group, right? So I hope you guys found some time to watch on the sharpages lesson. And because if I'm going to explain that, you know, how much time even the recorded lesson had taken, when if the sharpages was going to be done on the live, then it's going to take another day. So we first had the schedule for 3 days, hoping that I'll do the sharpages also on the live. And then it's like, you know, working days where working people are there. And then it's like, how much time could you dedicate to learn all of this? So we just wanted to make it a little more comprehensive. So the sharpages lesson was released to you, the pre-recorded one. And I felt it was also much more detailed for you to go through. We've had a couple of you send some queries regarding that, especially the double barrel, which was done on white ganache. I also wanted to give that medium as well. So how was the layering done? If at all you watched it, there were like 2 sets, which is a double barrel that I have here right now. How was it done? So the extra video of how I do the layering, because layering in the rings is something that I've been advocating my students in, say, in the past year or so. And I felt like it is like extremely easy. So that is one way you could do, or you could just keep stacking. But the most important thing is to double and then add the center board in between the double barrel and then stack the entire thing. Now, what I'm going to do, allow you to ask me some queries if you have on the sharpages. So you would have watched the sharpages on a regular cake like this, which is say the 8-inch, the one that is here right here, and then the double barrel. So the medium is the same here. So how do you work with ganache? Because ganache, the dark ganache is a different consistency. And the video that you watched will be white ganache. But however, by watching the dark ganache on a regular round cake and then on a double barrel with a different medium, you will be able to understand how the dark ganache works and how the white ganache works as well. So if you have doubts on the round ganache and also for the square, the technique is a little different. But then 2 of them are frosted because stacking a square is a little tricky. So I just wanted to include that as well. And then the frosting is done right here. Now, if you have any queries, we'll just go ahead addressing your sharpages, because now we're just going to move on. We're going to pack the day with quite a lot of techniques, and that is why the agenda has been given to you. So you understand where we stand, and based on that, you'll be able to follow. Now, only if you understand the sharpages thoroughly, it'll make sense to move forward. And so you'll be able to relate to what are the other things we will be doing regarding the wedding cakes. Okay. Deepa, do you use same recipe for cakes which is provided, or cake premix? No, I don't use premix. The recipes given out are the ones that I use for myself, and also the ones that I give out to my baking courses, both physical and online. So yeah, those are the recipes that I use personally for my classes and for the cakes that I do make as well. Any queries regarding the sharpages if you have? So you're clear, right? What we are doing, this board to board method is like, there is a board under each of the cakes. That is the foremost thing that you need to understand. There is board under all of them, and all the boards right here are acrylic. and they have a hole in the middle of the board that is under the cake, which is 10 mm. A 10 mm sized hole or a 12 mm sized hole is advised to have, because you're going to put a center rod through the tiers that we are going to stack, right? How to decide when to use oil-based cake and when to use butter-based cake, Gitu? See, when you're going to use butter-based cake, you know that you cannot refrigerate the cake. You want it to be in room temperature for quite a longer period of time, and you don't want it to be soaky, right? But you're going to use oil cake, you can use sugar syrup, or you have to use sugar syrup. And that case, that needs to be refrigerated and eaten up cold. Now, the consistency between the sponge and the cream that you're using, there has to be a logic behind that. So an oil cake or a fatless sponge cake where sugar syrup is being used, it has to be served from the fridge directly. Like, you should be able to take it from the fridge and then be able to cut it out and then eat it. Now, which cream from the fridge taken out immediately be able to cut through with a knife and the knife passes through easily? That is a question you need to ask for yourself. Would the ganache directly allow you to put the knife through when you take it out of the fridge? Because ganache has chocolate, and chocolate will set hard in the fridge, and the ganache will be hard right out of the fridge as well. So the knife that will pass through ganache, the ganache will be hard, and then the cake will be soaked and soft. So when you're going to push through the layers of the cake, the knife passes through easily. And when there is filling there, then the knife again finds it difficult to cut through. So there's inconsistency between the filling and the sponge which is being soaked. A little bit of soaking is fine, but a lot of soaking involves whipping cream based filling and the frosting, and that needs to be taken out of the fridge and served immediately. I do not personally soak butter cakes because I trust the butter cakes by itself are very moist. And the suggestion or the method that I follow is to bake the sponge, any sponge for that matter, take it out of the oven and cling wrap it 15 minutes out of the oven while the sponge is warm enough or even hot, that doesn't matter. Cling wrap it in 2 layers and freeze it. Freezing is where water turns into ice, which means the liquid element becomes frozen. And that is where the moisture from the inside of your sponge is locked inside and your cakes does not get dried up. So butter cakes, you don't need sugar syrup because you have to learn how to retain the natural texture and the moisture of the cake by itself. Oil cakes are meant to be used with sugar syrup. When you're using a little bit of sugar syrup, using ganache is fine. But when you're using a lot of sugar syrup, using plain ganache to fill and frost is not okay. But you can mix whipping cream into the ganache and make it light, and then it turns like a mousse. And after which you could fill and frost, and that will make it easy for the knife to go through and cut through the sponge and the filling. I think you should just make it like a full screen and half and half. Carbonated drink is just for the eggless cake to have an airy sponge that is very light as well. And that recipe has worked for me for quite several years together. And so if you were not okay with using carbonated drink, because I found it like it was fine for me all these years, but you could use any butter-based eggless sponges that are available with good reviews on the internet, and that works quite well too. You could just go ahead with condensed milk and butter and that kind of a cake, or you could also use butter or an icing sugar and with baking soda, baking powder, that also works fine. But with the aerated drink, the sponge is like quite fun, because when there is an eggless cake and the people are like, oh, it's not like the one with the eggs. So for me, to get it to at least 80% of what output I could give along with the recipes with egg. So this is one thing that kind of matches. And so you don't have much of a complaint from the client trying to tell that, hey, my eggless cakes are not good. So yeah, this recipe has worked for me. I hope you could just try it out and see if it works for you as well. Which aerated drink for vanilla sponge? Sprite. Can we use regular cake boards rather than acrylic disc for sharp edges if not making a stacked cake? If not making a stacked cake, yes, a regular cake board should be fine. But if you're using stacking, obviously you need hole. You can also create your own holes using regular cake boards, but it just kind of gets a little bit messy. So, and acrylic boards these days are available easily. I feel like, you know, the 3mm boards are a bit expensive and they are easy to use. But once you get the hang of this entire process of board-to-board ganache, and when the 3mm thickness board, you're getting comfortable with it, then move on to 2mm thickness acrylic board, because the cost of it is as close to or as same as the regular cake boards. And so you're just not pinching up too much from your pocket and not spending too much just because you have to follow the board-to-board technique. Right? Any more doubts? Because we have scheduled and a long day and we got to be doing a lot of stops. Okay. So also as a suggestion, like we are going to have segments because you have a schedule, and say suppose if I'm going to drape a round cake, say I'm just going to start with draping a 6-inch tall double barrel, and that I'm going to use fondant, and then I'm going to drape it some like not doing any texture on top of that, because there'll be stencil that's going to come on top of it. And on the 8-inch, I'm going to do crackled effect on fondant, and I'm going to use that to panel my 8-inch as well. Now, when we are going to deal with round cakes draping, we'll keep the questions that are relative to that particular segment that I am working. So, because all these lessons will be edited separately and given to you with titles. So if at all you have to go back to watching a round cake, you don't want to see me later on talking about a query that was just typed out on the chat box during the live, and that talks about something else, like maybe a flower or something which is also related to this course, but not very specific to that particular lesson that I am working on. So anytime I'm working on something, we just give the questions that are pertaining to that particular thing, and that will be easy and make the video lesson relatable. And if you have other queries, you could just write it down in your notepad or something. And we have end of the day Q&A debriefing will be there. And there you can just, shower me with any kind of questions, and I'll be there end of the day answering all the other questions that are left over. What do I do with these cakes after the class? Some of them I kind of keep it for research, like cling wrap or put it in the freezer to see how many days the texture remains the same. Most of it, if they are trials, and then we cut out some of the slices and then microwave and see how many days it's going to get dried up. Because when you ask me, then if I give an answer, it should have been something that I have researched. And some of them we just share it out with people, with a team, and then people who are working around, and neighbors and my team's neighbors and the kids and stuff like that. We kind of feed people half of it, and then half of it remains for researching and to see how different each sponge reacts with the time and the temperature of the fridge and the freezer and all that. Yeah, research, and we give it out to people who like to eat cakes. And yeah, I don't eat much of it. How do you use directed drink? Like, should we open the bottle before? Yeah, you have to open the bottle. Just the frizz has to be there. I think the recipe mentions that. So your frizz has to be there, and then right before you're going to pour it into the batter, that is when you will open and then add, and then that might make your batter look a bit curdled, but that doesn't matter. Just pour, go ahead and then bake. Your sponge will be just fine. And then close it out tightly and then keep it inside. Just try to retain the frizz, and you could use it for another time, but then just open and see the carbon dioxide stuff that bubbles have to be there if you have to use it for the sponge, and I expect the sponge to give you better results. Yeah, good. So after every section, we are just going to have the dummy screen coming up, which will say your class will resume shortly, and that will allow me the time to clear up the table and then get my stuffs for the next segment that we will be playing. Can we use soda? I think you should be able to use soda. You can try it out the soda. We just need that frizz. Yeah. Sounds good. Nobody has doubts on actual ganashing process. Everybody has gone through the recipes, and you're like sodas and sprites and, you know, the sponges and all that. But I really wish the board to board ganashing method is pretty clear for you. And because we have 2 weeks of support period, I really wish, unless you guys practice what you've learned in this 2 days, because 2 days is going to be jam-packed with a lot of things. Unless you practice them, it could be volatile. You could forget it later when you think like, hey, let an order come and let me just practice that at that time. That's not going to work. You have to practice. And that is why the support period is kept as 2 weeks, because in the first week, you work on it and share your results with me and allow me time to guide you. And that will be the second week. So just to be a little, a little more organized in taking up this course, like write down your queries and write down also inputs of what I am saying, because the information is extremely volatile, because I'll be bombarding you with a lot of techniques and a lot of information. So keep writing down and allow yourself time to practice this. Prepare yourself that you're going to do at least some part of this entire 2 days in the next 1 week. Oil cake, if cling wrapped hot, becomes sticky. How to avoid it? It doesn't become sticky. How would it get sticky? Oil cakes, even if you don't cling wrap also, if you keep it out, condensation happens and then water droplet gets on top of the cake and then it becomes sticky. It doesn't matter if you cling wrap hot or it doesn't cling wrap hot. The texture of the cake will just remain. The original texture of the cake does not change because we are cling wrapping and then freezing. You freeze it, it will just become hard, and then you take it out and then you start working on it. Like say after 15 minutes, you have to allow the condensation to go after you take it out of the freezer. So the sponges that are getting frozen overnight minimum, and the sponges are as good as fresh for a month. So you can also bake your cakes before like say 30 days max, and then freeze it and allow yourself to use it anywhere within that 30 days span of time. And when you take it out of the freezer, condensation happens. What is condensation? The water droplets that forms on anything that you take it out of fridge or freezer. And when the water droplets are there, you don't peel the cling wrap and leave the cake outside. And so if you do that, then the water droplets form on top of the cake, and that makes it sticky. Allow the water droplets, which is the condensation, to form on the outside of the cling wrap. And when you peel the cling wrap after 15 to 20 minutes, so the sponge remains with its original texture. Acrylic disc we use to sharp the ganache, we should give it to the clients. Yes, you have to give the bottom acrylic board to the client. The top, you will keep it back with you. What should be the filling for ganache cake with fondant drape? It could be anything. See, if you're going to watch that layering the cake in the ring, that video is also released to you. So there is a ring, and so you have a dam of the ganache. And then inside that, you can also use mousse. You can use your strawberry compote or caramel sauce or any soft filling also, that doesn't matter. But keep the dam around, which is like the piping of the ganache on the inside edge or the outside edge of the cake layer. And then put your mousse also inside. It really works. Ma'am, just wanted to say that I tried ganache technique as per the video on my 4-inch today, and it came out perfect. Thank you. That's really good. You did it today morning. Just send a picture of what you tried on the WhatsApp group so we could all see that. Sandhya, thank you for that. Right? Which color can I use for white ganache? You can use anything, because it doesn't matter if it has to be chocolate based or oil based. It doesn't matter, because by the time it is ganache, there is cream inside that. So the ganache, which is cocoa butter, chocolate, which is cocoa butter based, combines with cream, which is water based. And so adding gel colors also works for white ganache. How long does the ganache need to rest at room temperature before frosting? See, I have used couverture, and I will be using couverture because that works really well, sets really well, and makes life easier. Now, if you're going to use compound, it is going to behave a little differently. You might have to increase the ratio of the chocolate if you're using compound. Now, for couverture, you make ganache and it has to be refrigerated at least for 4 hours, because you want the chocolate to crystallize back again. Now, if you don't want to understand the technical aspects of what crystallization and all is all about, just to remind yourself that make the ganache and then leave it in the fridge for at least 4 hours. But then that will get hard, right? But then take it out and then again leave it in the room temperature for maybe another hour or so, and then use a spatula and then mix it up, and then you are good to go. Now you're taking it out of the fridge, say after 4 hours or even overnight. I mean, keeping it for longer doesn't matter. It's going to set quite well. And if you have to immediately use it, just cut out some portion of the ganache and then microwave it. And then you can keep mixing up and then wait for it to come back to the consistency you want to work. And then you are ready to go. But yeah, refrigeration of the ganache that is made is essential if you're using kovacha. What should be the proportion of sponge filling and the frosting for a cake? See, I was advising a 60 to 40%, which means for a 1 kilo cake, 600 grams of sponge to 400 grams of filling and the frosting. However, these days, the filling is so very important because the cake has to taste good. So I am going for a 500 grams of sponge to 500 grams of filling and frosting for a non-fondant cake, because obviously fondant depends on how thick you're going to drape and how much weight it is going to add. So leave out the fondant and just consider if you're going to make just a ganache cake. If you're going to make a a 1 kilo cake, then half a kilo will be sponge and half a kilo will be your ganache. Any brand suggestion on scrapers? Can I practice using dummies? See, dummies move and then they don't give you the feel of how to work with cakes. So I suggest to practice with cakes to get this technique right. Scraper suggestion, Ultimax also has, Omcraft also has, and both the brands scrapers, right? They are good. The metal ones, they are good. Which frosting goes with white ganache as it is sweet? See, white ganache is sweet. Then you could just try out, depending on the flavors, right? You could do dark chocolate ganache also, but then that cake has to go with chocolate, right? The dark chocolate. Or then go with a lemon curd. But then again, you need to have such a flavor pairing for that cake. So it all depends on what you're going to put inside, the flavor that you want to. Don't fill it with white ganache itself. Make an IMBC, a buttercream, which sugar is not too much. So it's not too overpowering and too sweet. If it has to be vanilla, right? But you can't be just throwing in dark chocolate or caramel or lemon curd and all in it. If it has to be like, people don't want any flavor in that, then obviously go for a lesser sweet, white-based, vanilla-based cream. Then that can be your buttercream or your whipping cream as well. And just add a little bit of the white ganache into the whipping cream, lighten the white ganache, and that could be the filling. So it is like a little lighter and then not as sweet as white ganache. Will the white ganache cake be too sweet? Can we use it to frost any cake? You should try it, Anita. If you haven't tasted a white ganache before, obviously, I would suggest not to fill and frost a cake with white ganache, and then it's like too overpowering. I suggest to go for a different filling and then use white ganache just as a frosting. So obviously, if somebody's going to cover a cake with fondant, and then if the question is like, fondant is too sweet, how would it go with the cake? Well, sometimes people choose not to eat the outer layer and then just go ahead with the filling, and that is why it is important to have better fillings in the layers. So you enjoy the cake and you could maybe leave out the outer layer in a wedge, I'm saying. So similarly, obviously, but white ganache is cream, and there people would just go ahead with the frosting. You could just not let them know, hey, leave out the frosting because it is too sweet. But do not fill the cake with white ganache. Or fill it with something else. Lighten the white ganache with the whipping cream and use that, or use IMBC, but make sure your IMBC also is not too sweet. How long can we keep a ganache cake at room temperature? See, when the AC is on, if there's no trouble and if it is not bulging out, if it is not melting, then practically you can just leave there. But the moment you see like it is bulging out or it is like, kind of getting melting, because you have to have AC. And in AC, like one whole day, it doesn't matter. In the end of the day, after you're working, you can put it back in the fridge. As long as the cake stays in the room temperature, because what is your room temperature? That is important. If you're working in AC, like from the morning till the night, it doesn't matter, it all stays good. But how well have you treated your sponge? Is it going to dry up? And that is something you need to keep in mind. Coacher compound brand names. Coacher, Van Houten, Maude. Compound, Van Leer, Maude. Fondant is very sweet. How to maintain sweetness for the whole cake together? See, that is what I was explaining. You have to balance between the filling that you're going to use on the cake. Then it depends on what flavors you're going to use. When I cannot suggest to go for a pineapple and a coconut, because someone has to ask that, right? So go ahead with a filling that is not as sweet as something that is going to cover your cake. Lighten it up with whipping cream, because that will just make any flavor just go soft. Or use IMBC. Like I said, use lesser sugar in that. Can we ready the ganache cake at night before? And so obviously, yes. This was made yesterday and it was in the fridge. And now it's like quite dry because I want to drape and I don't want it to be taken out of the fridge. Those are the questions you're actually supposed to ask now, because the next segment is going to be draping the cake. Like how many hours before the cake had gone into the fridge, and when should we actually drape it? I hope those questions come in the actual draping lesson. Whipped cream brand Riches Tropolite. Yeah, your ganache cakes go into the fridge, Jyoti. And it has to go into the fridge. You don't have to leave it in the room temperature, because you don't know like when it is going to bubble up and then, the outside of the texture changes and all. Now you can see a bit of condensation happening here on the double barrel. But then here on the 8-inch, the surface on the top is like quite dry. Nothing is sticky. And because before draping, you want to take the ganache cakes out of the fridge and keep it directly under the AC, because condensation is going to happen and you want to allow the condensation to happen all by itself. And then you want the surface to dry out before we are ready to drape. And this was kept 8 o'clock in the morning outside of the fridge. And we are here at say 10:30. And I am ready to drape the cake. If I keep the cake in fridge, will it become dry without cling wrap? Cake in the sense, is it your sponge alone or is it the ganache cake? Ganache cake, you can't cling wrap and keep it inside the fridge. Ganache has sealed the sponge inside. Only the sponge, if you're keeping in the fridge, it will dry. The ganache or the frosted cake, if it is kept in the fridge, it will not dry, at least for a day. But then you can't be expecting it to be like super moist for an hour, for like a week and all. It is not okay, right? How many days before do we need to take an order for wedding cake, and how to store all the big cakes? It depends on what is the complexity of the design you're going to do. Say if there's just stencil and lace and then fresh flowers, obviously you don't need much time. It all depends on your speed of working, Geetu. And if there are like some 50 flowers you have to do, then obviously that much time you have to give for yourself. So obviously a minimum of a week for a simple cake design should be fine, or then maybe maximum of 2 weeks for doing an elaborate wedding cake. You have used hot water or warm water in whipped cream cake. See, ice cubes put in a bowl of water and dipping the scraper in ice cube water. Chilled water is what works for whipping cream. Don't use hot water. It will melt. Any more questions? Shall we move? Because we should be on schedule and we'll have time to discuss segment after segment. And if there are any common questions, we could do that at the end of the day. How to whip cream stable? Whip it, like keep whipping it, over whip it and make it more than stiff peaks. and that is going to be stable. It will work. Or use the stabilized whipped cream, which is like using cooked corn flour paste along with whipping cream. I'll share a little more about that maybe at the end of the day. So I think we just have the display going on. I'll clear it up, we'll mute it, and then I'll get back when I'm going to come with draping the 6-inch double barrel cake.